I'm Jonah Comstock, Editor-in-Chief at Pharma Forum. I'm joined virtually by Marianne De Backer, CEO of Vir Biotechnologies. We're having our JP Morgan interview a little bit after the fact, but I'm eager to hear a little bit about your work, Marianne, and Vir and some of the announcements that you made at the conference. And then we can talk a little bit about what you heard in terms of biotech trends.
Sure. Yeah, happy to be here, Jonah.
Tell us about Vir a little bit.
Sure. Yes. So I joined as CEO of Vir about 10 months ago. And it's a really honor to lead Vir Biotechnology. It's a company, if you're not familiar, Jonah, that made its mark during the COVID pandemic. So our team developed a broad neutralizing antibody against SARS-CoV-2, and the resulting antibody sotrovimab went all the way to patients. So the team was able to take an idea in the lab and really transform it to a drug that went to patients and helping over 2 million patients in a period of 15 months. So wow. an amazing feat. And I think that's probably what the company is best known for. Now, since I've joined, we have actually come to analyze really what our strengths are at Vir. And we have refocused on the areas where we think we can create the most value for patients. So our vision is really bold. It's powering the immune system to transform lives. And we have two platforms that we use to do that. One is a B-cell platform, and that you might be familiar with. That is, of course, the platform that has been used to generate antibody therapeutics by Vir in the past. And then we also have a T-cell platform where we try to induce very unique CD8 T-cell responses in patients to fight disease. And the underlying concept here, Jonah, is that, whether you as a patient or as a human being are fighting a pathogen or an infection, or you're fighting cancer, sort of the power and diversity of your immune response often determines the outcome of whether this results in serious disease or not. And so what we are really trying to do is tip that balance and either provide, very powerful antibody therapeutics to patients to help fight an infection or another disease, or come up with, again, an in vivo T-cell response so that, again, the immune system is being helped in fighting an infection or cancer. So again, we have these two platforms, a B-cell platform and a T-cell platform, that each have very unique ways in which we can power the immune system.
And what are some of the indications that you're working on in terms of disease and treatment areas?
Sure. So one of the most exciting data that we discussed at JP Morgan was related to our hepatitis Delta program. And hepatitis Delta is, it's a tiny virus. It's one of the smallest viruses known. It's a co-infection with hepatitis B. And there's about 12 million people in the world that are infected chronically with that virus. And it's estimated that even 60 million more are undiagnosed. And it's very severe as a disease. If you're co-infected with hepatitis Delta, you're for more than 50% of those patients, life expectancy is, only 10 years because you progress to liver cirrhosis, to liver cancer. And again, people really die from those diseases. So what we have been trying to do is come up with a chronic treatment for hepatitis Delta. And we do that through the combination of two modalities. One is an antibody that we developed in our labs. It's an Fc-engineered antibody. It's called tobevibart. And one is a siRNA that is actually acting on a protein from hepatitis B virus that the hepatitis Delta virus needs for its life cycle. So we combine really an antiviral and an immunomodulator. And together we are looking to see whether we can come up with something that really perturbs this disease. It is a disease with incredible unmet need. So there is no treatment available at all in the United States. There is one treatment available in Europe, but that is a daily subcutaneous injection that patients have to have to give themselves for the rest of their lives. So that's really a tall order. And for the patients that do that, less than 50% of them see any, really clinical benefit. So what we have been doing is, again, we have been exploring this combination of an immunomodulator and an antiviral, and looking to see whether we could perturb the disease. And last year at a big liver meeting, AASLD, we reported the first data on 6 patients. And we reported actually 28-week data at JP Morgan. And what we have shown is that from those 6 patients, 6 out of 6 actually can bring the level of Delta virus RNA down 80%, so below the lower limit of quantification, so 100%. And 5 out of 6 even bring it down below the limit of detection. So, and that's the fastest decline in Delta RNA that has been ever seen. So wow. We discussed a lot, this data, and we have more data coming in the second quarter of this year, more patients and, outcomes for patients after 12 weeks and 24 weeks of treatment. So that, of course, will be very, very important. So that is one program that we have in phase 2. And that we're looking forward to report data out more again in the second quarter. We also have a late-stage hepatitis B program where we are using the same therapeutic candidate molecules in combining them to see whether we can achieve a cure for hepatitis B. And that data, 48-week treatment data, will be available at the fourth quarter of this year. And then finally, in our clinical pipeline, I talked about, the fact that we have both a B cell, but also a T cell platform. So from our T cell platform, we have a phase 1 HIV program that is ongoing. The first patient was dosed last year in September. And so the second half of this year, we will have immunogenetic data to see whether we can indeed induce the immunological response against HIV that we were hoping for. So a lot of data to come this year. And beyond that, Jonah, we also have several programs preclinically. So we are working on a preclinical antibody against flu A and B, so influenza A and B as a prophylaxis. We are working on an antibody against RSV and MPV, because those are the most important viruses for infants that cause mortality and morbidity. We're also working on an HIV cure antibody cocktail preclinically. And we have another T-cell platform molecule for HPV. So, a lot going on. And this year will be very, very hard work, but of course with a lot of potential for Vir.
Is this approach of combining the antiviral with the antibody kind of novel? Is that sort of a calling card for you guys? Is that something that you're seeing more broadly in the immunotherapy space right now?
So the history of hepatitis B has been, I should say, the journey to find a cure against hepatitis B has been a long one. And people have been trying out a variation of combinations of, modalities and mechanisms of actions. And I think we are now really seeing, some real progress and demonstrating that the combination of an antiviral and an immunomodulator makes sense. And so we were the first to demonstrate last year at EASL, another big European liver a meeting, that a combination of our siRNA called elebsiran, together, which is an antiviral, together with interferon alpha, which is an immunomodulator, could lead to 16% functional cure in hepatitis B patients. So, that was a really first great demonstration that our hypothesis might really work. And what we are doing now is actually combining as I mentioned, that siRNA with an antibody, which also has an immunomodulative effect. And we are also looking at, combining the antisense, the siRNA with interferon and adding the antibody on top. And all of that data, both for the doublet and the triplet, we will have end of treatment data at the end of the year.
So looking back at the conference, we're a few weeks out now. Anything interesting that you heard or saw, or did it change how you're thinking about kind of trends for 2024, either in your particular space or in biotech and pharma more broadly?
Yes, first of all, compared to JP Morgan 2023, I thought there was a real vibe of optimism in biotech. 2023, especially the second half of 2023, was tough for biotech. And, with the uptick in mergers and acquisitions, with, more companies sort of reporting that they're considering IPOs, I thought, and also with, of course, some of the interest rate changes that are expected and some uptick in the stock market in biotech, it all together, created for a very positive vibe for the industry and people looking forward to a lot of more positive things to come. So that was really appreciated for all of us, of course, in biotech. And then, not surprisingly, a really big portion of the meetings that were taking place were looking at the impact of AI in our industry. And, also we at JP Morgan talked about the fact that in the past, what we did in order to identify antibodies was we went to human subjects that had been exposed to viruses. We isolated the memory B cells and then went to clonal selection of antibody therapeutics. But what we do now is we still can do that, but we are then using an AI engine, which is called DAISY within Vir, which consists of 5 models that we can use and run AI and come up with antibodies that have a totally different profile. It could be more extended half-life, it could be, potency, breadth, also manufacturability, PK. So we can really optimize now our antibody therapeutics using AI. And that, that again allows us to come up with very, very unique new antibody therapeutics. And that theme of how to use AI, currently in drug discovery, in drug development, how to use insights for better patient selection in the trials, I thought was a very interesting topic. And, of course, much more to come there.
Great. What about in terms of the, for Vir and you talked a lot about the data you have coming up and what's going on with the company clinically. But obviously it's a business conference. Are you looking for investors, for partners? Are you looking to be an acquirer? What's your role there in terms of who you're meeting with at the conference?
Yes, so I was at JP Morgan from Saturday till Thursday. And it was really action-packed. And it was a combination of a lot of investor meetings. So as I mentioned in the beginning, there was a lot of interest in our hepatitis Delta data. So we spent a lot of time, educating investors on, what is hepatitis Delta, what is the potential commercial opportunity, what are our data showing, what can investors expect from our data in the second quarter and then in the fourth quarter. So a lot of conversations with investors. That was really the majority of my focus. And I also, of course, presented at the JP Morgan Healthcare conference. So that was a big portion of my time. Then another big portion of my time was spending at conferences talking about Vir Biotechnology and really providing thought leadership. So I was speaking at a number of conferences. You might have seen at Endpoints, at Vir's.
I think I saw you at Vir's, yes.
Right. Yes. So, that is really important because, again, we want to make sure that a broader audience is aware of what it is that we are doing at Vir Biotechnology. And of course, being at those conferences also gives us great insight into new topics. And then a third, and we spoke with a lot of media, such as yourself. And then a third bucket is really business development, to your point. So we are incredibly fortunate as a biotech company that we're very well capitalized. So we had 1.7 billion in cash and investments at the end of the third quarter. So we have the opportunity to really invest in our pipeline and in our platform, but we can also look at external opportunities. And so we met with a lot of companies to see, whether they had interesting assets that could be combined with, our knowledge and capability in immunology, in oncology, in virology, and in FC engineering of antibodies.
Any other final thoughts or additional kind of thoughts about trends or predictions? I know you're in the infectious disease space a little bit, the vaccine space, and that's something I haven't heard as much about what to expect in.
Yes, so Jonah, for us, also at Vir, what we want to do is take, the incredible platforms that we have and expand them beyond infectious disease. So a large focus of us is actually now to, and we will have an R&D day in the fourth quarter of this year to talk about how we are using, these platforms and how we are expanding, again, beyond infectious disease to power the immune system more broadly in other diseases where that really makes a difference. So we will also be focused much more, not just on infectious disease, which is still, of course, very important to Vir, but also looking at other therapeutic areas. Now, specifically to infectious disease, I think we are in an era sort of post-COVID, right, where there's certainly much less attention to COVID, even though, of course, we see that there's still very high infection rates. So, but for a lot of people, investors, COVID is sort of a topic that is no longer at the top of the priority list. Rather, what you again see is a lot of interest in new ways to find therapeutics in other infectious diseases. Influenza prophylaxis remains very important. There is an expectation that if a next pandemic would happen, it could be an influenza strain. And so there's a high interest to see the work that we are doing there, and of course others. And broadly in infectious disease, of course, there's a real outcry to do more in the area of antimicrobial resistance, which is, again, not getting a lot of attention from investors at this moment in time, but at some point, that is going to be a public health need that needs more attention.
Yeah, I did feel like I heard a bit more about AMR at this JPM than I have in the past. So maybe it's starting to get a little buzz, but I agree with you. It's very, for as important as it is and as potentially sort of looming on the horizon as it is, it would be good to see more attention focused there.
Yes. And, as with everything, sometimes data really drives the attention. And so it's a bit the same, honestly, when I talk about hepatitis Delta. We think of it as, looking back when there wasn't any good treatment for hepatitis C, there wasn't a lot of diagnosis happening, not a lot of people were talking about it. But once there was a really good treatment, then that acted as a flywheel for diagnosis. And again, we hope the same will be true for hepatitis Delta, because we have really promising data that once there is good, really good data that could make a difference for patients, that diagnosis will go up. And, for AMR, I think it's going to be really important that there's some solutions that are being brought forward, and that I think will trigger also more attention.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Marianne. I really appreciate you making the time to hop on.
Sure.
And it's great to hear about what you're doing, and look forward to hearing to seeing some of that data as it comes out this year.
Okay, my pleasure. Thank you, Jonah.